This is the situation at the end of game term 1. We're looking at the North Theatre, the Central German Theatre, the Southwest and the Balkans first. In the north, Russian units are making slow progress. It's difficult up there, that there's stormy weather and it's Arctic terrain. But they've captured one Norwegian port. They've moved a fair way into Norway, but they've knocked out one small Norwegian detachment that got in their way. In terms of the Finns and the Swedes are still neutral, they're not doing anything. The Norwegians, their Norwegian territorial units have arrived, and the Norwegian movements moving north. There's also a couple of NATO units that have arrived to support them in ports on the coast. In terms of the Baltic, Russian attempts to launch an air attack against Bornholm failed due to bad weather. They were unable to do any naval activity because the fact that the Pact only have restricted transport in that area. Oh, it reminds me, the Pact tried to make an airborne landing in Norway, but that was called off due to bad weather as well. In terms of Norway, NATO wanted NATO wanted Denmark's forces to retreat back into Germany, but they effectively refused and have placed all their units in a defensive position on the causeways leading across to Copenhagen. In terms of Europe, the Russians made some decent progress, not as much as they would like to. In the north, they've captured Lübeck. They're going to capture Kiel next go, and almost certainly capture Hamburg, as the NATO forces are withdrawing to a line along the river here. The NATO have also established a pretty solid line going all the way down to the Austrian border. NATO forces have managed to bring in a lot of territorials, Belgium, Netherlands, German territorials, plus a lot of French reinforcements, and some American units have arrived by POMCUS and from the Strategic Reserve. In the central area, the Russians have pushed the British back, a combination of pushing us back and a strategic retreat to form a line. We've not really made much progress down here, and there's been quite a bit of fighting in the south here, but it hasn't really achieved anything for either side. In terms of air, there's a lot of units being shot down on because there's been sort of long distance strike and cratering missions, which have also have managed to do a bit of damage on NATO. NATO itself couldn't do any strikes this turn, because it's a special rule for the first turn of war. A lot of Russian aircraft shot down, and quite a few NATO ones as well. In terms of Italy are pretty much isolated from the war because both Yugoslavia and Austria are neutral. So the Italian expeditionary units are being transferred to Germany via France, but that's taken quite a bit of time. In the Balkans area. There's been quite a bit of fighting involving Turkey and Bulgarian units, with some Romanian units supporting them. And both sides have given and taken quite a lot of casualties in that area, but it's still pretty much a stalemate. Not much in the way of air activity in those sectors, though. There's been effectively nothing in the southwestern sector because of the way the neutral nations are keeping the two sides apart. Greece has even ended up neutral, even though it's a NATO member, which is a bit annoying, but that's just the way it happens by random chance. There's some NATO taking some damage to their runways from planes destroyed on runways, and some cratering going on. Yet again, NATO weren't able to deep strike for that turn. We go off to the Middle East. The Syrians have taken a hell of a beating. The first thing, the Iraqis drove them out of Iraq. The morale is shaken, and it's very close to being disrupted, which will effectively knock them out of the war. They're not going to last much longer. There's been massive battles around the Golan Heights and southern Iraq. Syrians have taken terrible casualties, but they've handed out a lot of disruptions and damage to the Israeli units as well. And the Jordanian units have taken a bit of damage in this process. Down on the Sinai front, it's pretty much stalemate. The Egyptians managed an early attack, but it was a disaster, and there's very little they can do against the strength of the Israelis, so they're not really providing much support to their Syrian allies, but really they can use all their air force, if they can get it off the ground next turn, to support the Syrians. In terms of the Middle East, Saudi forces are not really doing anything. There's no real sort of opportunity to deploy them yet. They could move through Iraq, but I don't see that's particularly interesting. In terms of Iraq itself, it's got a lot of territorials mobilised, and their army is pretty much forming a line, not a very strong one, in western Iran. Nothing going on in the Kurdistan area. In Turkey, the Russians in Anatolia, eastern Anatolia, made quite big gains, really, because the Turks were not really deployed very effectively. But a large number of Turkish units are now in this area, but I'm worrying whether I've weakened the Turks too much. So I'm transferring some units back to the Turkish European front, which can't afford that Bosphorus to be captured by the enemy. In terms of the rest of Iran, sort of Russian and American forces are pretty much holding each other off here. What remains of the loyalist Iranian armies managed to capture Shiraz down there, but they're pretty much ineffectual. They've just been blown away through attrition, and they're not able to get any replacements. When I say attrition, I mean attrition by combat, not by anything else. So there's roughly a line going through Iran where the two armies are sort of holding each other at bay. So there's not a great deal of happening there anymore. And that's really it for the first turn. Now, going on to the second turn, now this is going to escalate massively. because I've got the Far East Theatre to consider. That's like one turn behind everyone else. That they Warsawpak will attack the Chinese on this coming turn.